On higher education will come to order. Clerk, please call the roll.
Kemple.
Here.
Paul.
Here.
Busey.
Here.
Burns. Burrows.
Here.
Clardy. Cole.
Here.
Gonzalez. Howard.
Here.
Lalani. Rainey.
Here.
Quorum is present. As a reminder, anyone present wishing to testify before the committee, please register at the kiosk located in the hallways behind the hearing rooms. If you require assistance in registering or testifying, please contact the committee staff. Good morning. Let's dive right into it. Chair lays out HB 2171 and recognizes Chairman Guerra to explain the bill.
Morning, Chairman and members. Thank you for allowing me to lay out House Bill 2171. I would like to give some background and context to this legislation. This bill is a legislative recommendation from the Public Health Interim Committee's report. I have provided you a copy of the report's recommendation. This bill transforms that recommendation into policy by establishing the Texas Center for Rural Health Education at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, UTRGV. Excuse me. The center's responsibilities include performing an assessment of rural health education in this state, developing performance matrix for rural health education and outcomes, conducting research to identify best practices in underserved rural areas, developing recommendations for funding of tuition and loan repayment programs, developing partnerships to address healthcare shortages in underserved rural areas, developing a plan to improve rural health education and outcomes, maintaining a website, and submitting to the legislature a biennial report. There are 3 million rural Texans who face enormous healthcare disparities. More than 100,000 Texans live in one of 32 counties with no primary doctor. And let me repeat that, no primary doctor. The federal authorities designate 75% of counties in Texas as a health professional shortage area or medically underserved areas per the Texas Rural Health Association. 74 counties in Texas do not have a hospital, and at least 20 rural hospitals have closed since 2010. Obesity is more common in rural regions, and rural Texans die of heart disease and stroke at rates far higher than Texans overall. 148 counties have no obstetrician. 158 counties have no general surgeon, and 185 counties have no psychiatrist. Several members of this committee represent rural counties. Chairmans Kemple, Burns, Burrows, and Representative Clardy all represent rural counties and know firsthand the healthcare challenges in their districts. This legislation has an approximately $2 million fiscal note. According to University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, UTRGV, this money will be used to fund 9.3 additional employees to operate the center, including a director. This is a small price to pay to transform rural healthcare across Texas. I have included a contingency rider in the budget for this bill. Members, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Please show Ms. Gonzalez present. Members, have any questions for Chairman Guerra? Seeing none, thank you, sir. We'll bring you back up to close.
Chairman and members, I think this is an extremely important bill to so many Texans, including many of your areas. And with that, I close.
We're going to back up. We have somebody, we're just going to check. I don't know if it's a resource or not, but we'll ask if Dr. Leonel Vela, would you like to testify?
Well, I'm here as a,
Resource. Now that, let's get you into the record and we'll just make sure that we play by the rules. We show you registered as Dr. Leonel Vela, testifying on behalf of the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley and School of Medicine on the legislation. Is that correct?
yes, sir, I'm on the
Members,
bill.
do we have any questions? Thank you for being here today.
All right, thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against HB 2171? Seeing none, Chair recognizes Chairman Garrett.
Chairman and members, and again, I close.
Thanks, sir. If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Hearing none, HB 2171 is pending. Chair lays out HB 5330 and recognizes Representative Reynolds to explain the bill.
Good morning, Chairman Kemple and members. Thank you for the opportunity to lay out House Bill 5330. Within Fort Bend Independent School District, there are areas that are outside of any community college service area. In order to ensure Fort Bend ISD students have access to community colleges, services, and resources, students need to be considered in district by a community college system. This bill would extend Houston Community College's service area boundaries to include part of Fort Bend ISD that is outside of Warden County Junior College's service area to provide Fort Bend ISD students access to essential services and resources offered by HCC. We have all seen huge benefits to our students when high schools and community colleges collaborate, and this is one of those collaborations. Members, we have the Chancellor of Houston Community College, Dr. Maldonado, who is here to testify about the importance and significance of this legislation. Unless there are any questions, I'll reserve the right to close.
Mr. Reynolds, we'll give you that right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair calls Cesar Maldonado.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. We have you registered as Cesar Maldonado, testifying on behalf of Houston Community College on the legislation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning, Chairman Kemple and members. Thank you for the opportunity to address you on this important matter to students today. House Bill 5330 by Representative Ron Reynolds. I am Dr. Cesar Maldonado, Chancellor of Houston Community College System. I'm here today to testify on the bill on behalf of HCC and those that we proudly serve. HCC has been serving the communities of Fort Bend County for decades, and we have campuses in Missouri City and in Stafford. Our service area takes in much of the north and eastern portions of the county, while our peer, Wharton Junior College, has been assigned most of the south and the west portions of the county. A few areas remain unassigned, and two of those areas are addressed by House Bill 5330. We enjoy a strong partnership with Fort Bend ISD. Evidence of this is our dual credit presence in all 11 of the high schools at Fort Bend ISD, including Stephen F. Austin, George W. Bush, and Ridge Point High Schools, which are located in the two areas that are the subject of House Bill 5330. Further, our partnership with Marshall Early College High School and at Willow Ridge and Hightower P-Tech High Schools showcase our collective work with Fort Bend ISD focused on student success. Because of our extensive programming in Fort Bend ISD, we offer educational services to all of the students and residents, not just those that are in our service area. This includes the students who live in the areas addressed by this House bill. House Bill 5330 would assign to HCC two geographic areas that are unassigned and that are adjacent to existing HCC service areas. The importance of this is that it allows us to consider these students in-district students. They're currently out of service area students, and they fall into a higher tuition category once they leave dual credit. We currently are not charging for dual credit, so the difference is once they graduate. To achieve the goal of building a talent-strong Texas and deliver on the expectations of House Bill 8, it's essential that we build well-defined pathways for high school to college so that students' progression leads to the outcomes that the students deserve and that Texas expects. During their dual credit work at Fort Bend ISD, these students become familiar with HCC faculty, HCC advisors. They become familiar with the rigor and the pathways of our programs, thereby facilitating their transition from high school to HCC to continue their college. And the best way to do this, the best way to position them is to allow them equal access to HCC by having their areas be part of the HCC service area so they can approach HCC on an equal footing as far as tuition is concerned. It's notable that we shared our plans to file this legislation with colleagues at Wharton Junior College, Fort Bend ISD, and the Texas Association of Community Colleges, and we did not receive any opposition to our plan. In closing, I'm keenly aware of this committee's work to enhance the ability of community colleges to best serve the state's goals with the passage of House Bill 8 related to new community college funding models. I thank you for all your work in that and the thoughtfulness that went into moving that legislation forward. House Bill 5330, in part like HB 8, will also allow Houston Community College to expand the most economical college access to community college students that we already serve. It would enhance our ability to provide educational services and programs in partnership with Fort Bend ISD and our joint students. This bill, House Bill 5330, is a positive step in the continuation of our service and commitment to students and student success. Thank you for your consideration. I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Mr. Paul.
Thank you for being here, Chancellor. Do you have a property tax in your system?
We do, yes, sir.
And this expanded zone where these people would be coming into your system, does this bill allow them to have a vote on if they want to join?
It allows them to have a vote, but we're not considering bringing forward a property tax at this time in the near future at all. This is merely bringing these areas into our service delivery area. In Fort Bend County, we have some areas that are within our taxing district, for example, like Missouri City, but there are other areas that are in our service area but are not in our taxing district. So there's a distinction there in terms of tuition, but not as large as the distinction between those that are outside of our taxing district and those that are outside of our service area.
So if you're in the service area but outside the taxing district, you just pay a higher fee to be a student.
Correct.
Than if you're inside the taxing jurisdiction. But this, and what you're saying is these guys outside that service area will pay even a higher fee or something. And then if I expand the service area, they'll be able to get in at a lower fee, but not as low as the guy that's in the taxing jurisdiction. And then this new area, you're not going to be taxing.
That's correct.
From what you're saying.
That's exactly right. And because of some of the approach of House Bill 8, it's correct, we are looking at reducing tuition because we're focused on outcomes. We want those students to come to us and move through the process and become outcomes in the throughput to graduation. With the funding that's coming through House Bill 8, we hope will allow us to focus on that. So we are arguing this to allow us to reduce the tuition for those students that are in these areas.
All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, members. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wants to testify on for or against HB 5330? Seeing none, Chair recognizes Mr. Reynolds to close on his bill.
Thank you, Chair Kemple and Representative Paul. I'm glad you raised that question. There is no additional tax implications on the citizens. This certainly is a great benefit for the students. and rising costs of everything, goods and services. This allows them to save money and get their education, their higher education. I think this is a great bill. There's no opposition to it. Fort Bend ISD is strongly in favor of it. The constituents that live in the area that's currently out of district, they're really eager to see it for the benefit of those students. And I ask for your favorable consideration. And if this is the committee's desire, that this will be referred to local and consent. And with that, I close.
Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Oh.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds.
Thank you.
If there's
Thank
no
you.
objection, the bill will be left pending. Hearing none, HB 5330 is pending. Chair lays out HB 1509 and recognizes Mr. Patterson to explain his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to lay this bill out before this committee. My first time before this committee in 3 sessions. So this is a simple financial transparency bill that would require our great public universities and colleges to send a report to the legislature every year about how much money they contribute to nonprofit news organizations. That's as simple as it is. It's just a little transparency bill so we can see how much money is going there. My office filed several open records requests last year and got the numbers, and it is millions of dollars that go to nonprofit news organizations. And so we just want to have a little bit easier way of obtaining that information to see if that's an appropriate use of funds in the future.
Ms. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, Representative Patterson. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Welcome to the Higher Ed Committee.
Thank you.
We're awfully nice here.
I see a lot of Longhorns on this committee.
I have a logistical question. I love transparency. I love financial transparency. I guess my question is, a lot of times if you entity donates to a nonprofit media group, it's also so they can have access or publicity in the same way they would make an investment in a for-profit media group. Don't you think we should know across the board how much they're investing in media, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit?
I'd be happy to take that amendment, if you want to offer it, or maybe, address that in a committee sub. I'm unaware of the same amount of dollars going to the for-profit as the nonprofit. Maybe that's the case. I know it's been millions of dollars in the nonprofit space.
I mean, I remember watching a football game and seeing like a commercial that would be a I think part of the reason that it's a donation is it's also for publicity. There's an event, or there is they want to have their name on something. So separately for a for-profit, I'm just saying for transparency across the board. I'm not trying to hurt your idea. I'm just trying to have some balance to your idea, if that makes sense.
No, I hear you absolutely. But in our record request that we did to all the university systems, by the way, what's astounding is that it's not just for advertising, at least as much as we could tell, the ones that would actually give us the data. It ranges everything from, thousands of dollars in TribFest tickets to subscriptions to employee training, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Mr. Patterson, would you hang on a second? For those talking in the back, we have a hallway. Y'all can do that in. Please respect the testimony that's happening. Thank you. Mr. Patterson, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. So it really does, go across the board. What's interesting is the Dallas College District paid $12,750 for the Dallas mayor meeting and marketing. So, it's not just advertising, although I don't know that UT and A&M, who have both spent about $1 million with the Tribune, really need to advertise for students.
No, and I'm not judging. I think transparency is great. This is not like anti-transparency conversation.
Sure.
It's just to have transparency across the board, as opposed to like singling out this one media group, as opposed to saying, let's look at all media as a collective. And that's
Sure.
my only recommendation.
Yeah, I'd be happy to take that amendment.
Thank you. See how we work together?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So do you envision, I realize this is just transparency at this point, and absolutely I'm for transparency. Do you envision how this could be used? I mean, you seem to be alarmed by the amount and the purpose. is there something that you feel is an appropriate level, or where does this go?
Well, we don't really know. I think that's, we started a fact-finding mission last year, and we don't really know, some of the PRs that we submitted, they didn't give us any data whatsoever. What's really crazy is that Lone Star College was about the second highest on the list in terms of annual giving. It was, Lone Star College was $169,000 for Texas Tribune, GR, and ads. And certainly I could understand where Lone Star College would, be in a different boat than maybe the University of Texas or Texas A&M when it comes to recruiting students. But we don't really know what's out there. And that's just for the Tribune. That doesn't include, NPR or, any of the other nonprofit media. I think it's, my personal belief is that, if we're going to have freedom of the press, that, there should be a wall of separation between the press and, government. And if we're propping up a press agency with tax dollars, or maybe it's tuition dollars, at a time when tuition costs are skyrocketing and parents are having a hard time sending their kids to college, and folks that don't have the ability to have their parents send them to college are having to, come out of pocket for expensive tuition costs, then, maybe this is a way that we could lower those costs over time.
So you just feel like it's an inappropriate expenditure?
I do, but that's just based on some anecdotal data that we have, at this point in time. I mean, really, we need the transparency here to be able to see how many dollars through the entire systems are really going through to these agencies, and then what they're being used for.
Did you talk with any of the higher education institutions about what their expenditures were and what they?
We did. We spoke with several, and we also issued these PIRs and over the last. In the last calendar year, and took a while to gather all the data.
Right, but I mean in terms of talking to them once you got the data about what they purchased.
Yes, we
and
did.
What did they say?
Um,
I'm asking what they felt like they were getting out of doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they feel like they're getting out of
so
it, but I mean, I have what they got out of it to some degree, but I don't know what they feel like they're.
So there's not been any discussion about the purpose of this and what the institution achieved?
I mean, I have the data on here in terms of, what it was for, Tribune Festival registration, registration fees, subscription tickets, and Tribune Fest, Trib Fest tickets. I mean, these are multiple line items here, event sponsorships, subscriptions.
Yeah, I see the chart. I just wondered if you had any discussion with them about why they felt that was an appropriate expenditure for them to make.
I couldn't tell you.
You didn't have that with them? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Paul.
Mr. Patterson, do you know of any other state groups that are funding media?
Well,
TxDOT, the prison system, anything like that? Are they using dollars to go to these kind of institutions?
That's a really good question. I'm not clear on, these specific ones. I do know that, for example, well, no, actually, that's not a nonprofit. No, I'm really not sure of these other entities that would be, sponsoring these or buying tickets with tax dollars and that sort of thing. Perhaps they do. I'm unaware of any other state agency at this point in time that spends money in that way.
Yes, it's pretty bizarre that a university would be spending money on that.
I agree.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Members? Ms. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to go back, I'm grateful for your openness about wanting to have transparency across the board and not like pigeonhole one group. I do want to say that I think it's really important that, like, I didn't like when you say like buying tickets for the Tribune Fest, right? Like, that's just to engage in a student experience, to hear members. I think I've been on the panels with multiple members. Like, not all of it is. I just want to make sure as we have the conversation moving forward that we don't think that it's just a negative expenditure, that it could be a positive expenditure. And while we should know how much that is, I just think it's really important that the discourse stay above level, to say, like, we just want to know what the money is, but we're not going to make a judgment on that without having full information, because I do think we can make big assumptions like, oh, they're spending millions of dollars. Well, spending millions of dollars, but there's a good outcome, particularly for young people, because that should be our goal, to help young people, then that should be okay. Because I guess I would ask the question, where else would these young people have access to legislators if it weren't for maybe something like that? And I think that's a positive. I want them to know us. I want them to see that you and I work together and hear our voices on a panel. And so I don't want to, again, just like as we go through the conversation, I want to be really intentional and really careful together that we're not saying that this is just a negative. I'm not saying there's no judgment to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with the transparency, right? I mean, I'm not here, judging anyone necessarily. I mean, I think that we've got to understand what we're dealing with here, but we're dealing with millions of dollars, millions of taxpayer dollars at, public universities that are going to fund nonprofit media. And, those are dollars that could be pumped back into the system to lower tuition costs or, what have you.
I mean, I agree. I have questions about how much we spend on, I don't know. I'm trying to say something that won't make somebody mad, but but there's a lots of questionable investments that could be made in any institution. And so I want to question those things. And ultimately, I do want to help the kids, but it's also really important that we don't make a negative assumption without fully understanding.
Sure,
okay?
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Patterson, thank you. We'll call you back up to close.
Yes, sir.
Chair calls Oscar Rodriguez. Good morning.
Good morning,
We
Mr.
show you
Chairman.
registered as Oscar Rodriguez, testifying on behalf of Texas Association of Broadcasters on the legislation.
Yes, on the legislation. Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Oscar Rodriguez. I'm president of the Texas Association of Broadcasters, testifying on House Bill 1509. TAB represents more than 1,300 radio and television broadcast stations that are licensed by the Federal Communications Commission to serve distinct local communities throughout the state of Texas. And I want to thank Representative Patterson's staff for being so open and helpful to us in understanding this measure throughout this process. A little about these non-commercial, about our industry. About 300 of our stations are non-commercial educational stations that operate as nonprofits, many with boards of directors, and 2/3 of these stations air primarily religious programming. We also have several that serve tiny communities with low-power transmitters. Probably the most well-known of our non-commercial broadcasters are the public radio and television stations that are licensed to various colleges and universities across the state. And I want to applaud the good work that our higher education institutions are doing in the training and development of the next generation of professionals for broadcasters and the media industry writ large, including information technology, radio frequency management or coordination, production, marketing, community development, data analysis, and of course, journalism. The investments that Texans are making in this educational curriculum pays dividends, and I wanted to just take a moment to recognize the great leadership that you and the educators on the front line are providing. With respect to the educational and marketing partnerships that entities strike with nonprofit media, non-commercial broadcasters are very reliable partners by virtue of their commitment to serving local communities and their long history of complying with FCC regulations and public interest obligations. That FCC license is subject to renewal every 8 years, and we work daily to protect and honor it. So this is just the corner of nonprofit media that local broadcasters occupy, and I just wanted to share these insights with you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Cole?
Do you have any information about how much higher education institutions are funding you?
With respect to the kind of data that Representative Patterson's legislation would seek, no, that is not something that I would be privy to. All of those relationships are individual with a vast number of different parties.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Chair calls Kirsten Schwab. Good morning. We show you registered as, please show Dr. Lalani present. We show you registered as Kirsten Schwab, testifying on behalf of Texas PBS on the legislation.
I am, yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, Chairman Kemple, committee members, Representative Patterson. Appreciate this opportunity to report to you about the PBS stations in our state. I welcome this opportunity to talk a little bit about the vital partnership that we have with public colleges and universities, and to urge you as policymakers to protect and strengthen our funding. For more than 60 years, public television stations have been dedicated to the mission of educating Texans. Stations meet that goal through partnerships with Texas colleges and universities. We partner with our state's universities on content, research, workforce development, and expanding learning in our communities. Half of the state's PBS stations are licensed to public universities and colleges. In fact, state universities have played a key role in the origin of public media and continue to be critical partners in our work to enlighten, inspire, and educate all Texans. The first public media station to go on the air in our country was right here in Texas. KUHT at the University of Houston went on the air in 1953, broadcasting college courses to provide access to learning for all in Houston. Over the last several years, we've endured a trying time. During the COVID-19 pandemic, when economic activity and much of the nation shut down, despite these challenges, public media stepped up in a big way, connecting our children to their teachers as soon as schools shut down. Thousands of teachers turned to public media digital platforms for state-aligned content and lesson plans to continue learning while students were at home. Working with the Texas Education Agency and public universities, Texas stations broadcast more than 9 hours of free over-the-air educational programming for grades K through 12 every day. The PBS stations work with local schools and superintendents to make this vital instruction available to all kids, but especially those with limited devices and bandwidth. Public media stepped up during this time for schools and teachers, working with TEA Commissioner Morath to assure parents and provide links to vital learning resources in the home. Beyond the ways we partner to support learning, stations also play a pivotal role in university outreach and research. At the station licensed to Texas A&M, we partnered with Chancellor Schlarp to provide a weekly television show during the pandemic. It began as an effort by KAMU to provide the College Station community with important information and quickly grew into a weekly television show broadcast across the state and featuring the research programs and professors of the Texas A&M system. Our partnership with the University of Texas led to the creation of Austin City Limits, which turns 50 next year and has been recognized around the world as the largest running music program on American television. As Texas Tech professors were studying how children with autism can focus and learn, they found that the PBS Kids program, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, was very effective in capturing the attention of kids with special needs. This research was then used to develop new episodes to expand our understanding of how kids with special needs acquire skills like empathy, recognizing others' emotions, and knowing how to respond and follow directions. All of these skills are a focus of Daniel's adventures and are critical to a young child's success in school. We continue to learn from university researchers how to better engage with kids and to help them learn. The role that public universities provide to public media is crucial. The partnership between Texas public colleges and university goes far beyond content and includes internships, workforce training, and apprenticeships. From the beginning, we in public media have been dedicated to working with state colleges and universities to provide more access to education. By providing access to resources, expertise, and a commitment to the public good, Texas universities help us produce high-quality content that informs and engages the public. This, in turn, helps to develop a more informed and engaged citizenry, which is essential for our healthy democracy. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for being here, members. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Chair calls James Quintero. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is James Quintero. I represent the Texas Public Policy Foundation, here to testify in strong support of HB 1509.
Thank you.
I want to begin by thanking Representative Patterson for bringing forward this rather important transparency measure. Were it to go into effect, I believe that it would strengthen the public's right to know about government spending. It would go far to improve public trust in the media. And I think it would also inform some of the spirited conversations we have both inside these walls and outside as to the proper size and role of government. Now, one of the reasons why I think legislation like this is necessary is that we do not have a complete grasp on how much universities are spending on nonprofit newsrooms. Now, part of the challenge there is that there are a large number of higher ed institutions. In fact, according to Ballotopedia, there are 107 public colleges and universities, and that was as of 2016. One of the other complicating factors here in getting a grasp on how much government spending is occurring is the fact that there are a growing number of potential recipients. Some of the more prominent digital-only nonprofit newsrooms in Texas to come online just in the recent past include the Texas Tribune, founded in 2009, San Antonio Report, founded in 2012, the Austin Monitor, which came online in 2013, El Paso Matters, which was founded in 2019, and Fort Worth Report, which was founded last year. These entities tend to be funded through a mix of public and private monies, and I think it's important, at least from a taxpayer standpoint, to understand just how much public monies are going into these institutions. And so I would suggest that in this type of environment where universities are numerous and nonprofit newsrooms are growing, that we help illuminate this situation so that any unease may be set aside. Another reason to welcome this bill is that it has the potential to improve trust in media, since transparency begets credibility. And I think that's sorely needed in today's media environment. And I've got a bunch of different polls that I won't bore you with, but the one that really grabbed my attention this morning was this one from Gallup, bless you, sir, was from Gallup 2022. It found just 7% of Americans have a great deal of trust and confidence in the media. Meanwhile, 28% of U.S. adults say they do not have very much confidence, and 38% have none at all in newspapers, TV, and radio. I think those are alarming numbers. For the sake of our democratic institutions, I think we ought to strive on the public policy front to do what we can to reverse those trends. And one surefire way to do so is to illuminate the financial connection between media and government. Now, in the interest of being helpful, I do want to offer a few recommendations to improve the introduced version, although I will say that I think it is just fine and well as it is. But on page 1, line 21, the bill author may or may not consider adding attendance of a regular or special event and trainings to the list of categories that would be reported. And then secondarily, I would recommend that these categories of expense be listed out in line item format, not in aggregate terms, so that people have a much better appreciation for the amount of money that's being spent and why. With that, I want to thank you for your time, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you, sir. Members, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Chair calls Connie Burton. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm just fine. We
Good.
show you registered as Connie Burton, testifying on behalf of yourself and the Texan on the legislation?
On the
Yes,
legislation.
ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Chairman Kempel and members of the committee, my name is Connie Burton. I am representing the Texan as its founder and CEO, and I'm here to testify on HB 1509 by Representative Patterson. I'm here to make myself available to answer any questions you might have about the Texan's business model that does not rely on public dollars or advertising revenue. The Texan is a statewide political news organization focused on factual reporting of political news without the ideological narratives that are so pervasive in the media today. While this bill focuses on taxpayer-funded institutions of higher education and their financial support of media organizations, I think it is important to note that the Texan has purposefully staked out a role in reporting political news without relying on public funding. Besides the personal investment that my husband and I continue to put into this organization, 100% of our revenue comes from subscriptions. We believe that this model is the best way to uphold journalistic integrity, as this business model does not incentivize clickbait headlines just to gain more advertising dollars, nor does it give any appearance of doing the bidding of the same entities that send their lobbyists to your doors every session. I launched the Texan 4 years ago, immediately after my last term representing Tarrant County in the Senate. And because there was no secret about my political views and opinions, there was certainly some doubt by politicos regarding how un-agenda-driven the Texans reporting would be. Frankly, that's part of the reason we chose this business model. Our funding comes from our subscribers. We're not seeking financial help from the same government entities we are also reporting on. And I believe this has helped to earn the trust of our readers, which in turn made them a subscriber. And our subscribers do come from both sides of the political aisle. Also, since our funding comes solely from our subscribers, they are the only ones we are accountable to. So if we do not deliver the product of factual reporting of Texas political news, they'll leave us, and the Texan will cease to exist. That's how the market works and is supposed to work. However, a nonprofit news organization can become increasingly partisan and agenda-driven, driving away half its readers, but continue to be well-funded by government entities who send them money from those same taxpayers who are leaving them in droves, but who are unknowingly still funding them. I wanted no part of this funding model for the Texan. I hope this has shed a little light on the business model we've built that is an alternative to newsrooms that heavily rely on contributions from taxpayer-funded public universities. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you happen to have them.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, none. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Is there anyone else wish to testify on for or against HB 1509? Seeing none, Chair recognizes Mr. Patterson to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If there are no other questions, I'd respectfully ask that Mr. Hefner go last and I close.
Thank you. If there's no objection, HB 1509 will be left pending. Hearing none, 1509 is pending.
Thank you.
Chair lays out HB 4778 and recognizes Chairman Dutton to explain the bill. Mr. Chairman, good morning.
Good morning.
And you have a substitute, is that
There
correct?
is a substitute, yes.
Representative Howard offers committee substitute HB 4778.
The difference in the substitute and the originally filed bill is we had a mistake in the original file bill that it talked about all of the administrators at the law school reporting to the board, and that's not what we were trying to do. Essentially, this is a new concept, but one that in talking with many of the law professors suggested that they ought to have the opportunity to report directly to the board because they were not like the Department of Biology or the Department of English. They were a professional school, and they felt that if we allowed them to report directly to the board, that would elevate it somewhat and get it the respect and the attention that it deserves. And so that's the reason I filed the bill, because they came to me with it, and I said, well, I think it's a good idea as well. And I'll be happy to answer any questions, Mr.
Members, do we have any questions for Chairman Dutton? Seeing none, stay right there, Mr. Chairman. Is there anyone else wish to testify on for or against HB 4778? Hearing none, Chair recognizes Mr. Dutton to close.
I close, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all.
Back up, members. Ms. Cole.
Did you talk to the Board of Regents? How did they feel about it?
Well, they have they are not in it. They said they would respond accordingly if that's what we decide. But this came from the law school professors. So, with that, Mr. Chairman, I close.
Thank you, Mr. Dutton. The committee substitute is withdrawn, and if there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Hearing none, HB 4778 is pending. Chair lays out HB 4487 and recognizes Representative Smith to explain the bill.
Thank you, Chairman, Vice Chair, Madam Clerk. It's nice to be before this awfully nice committee here this morning.
Got everybody in a good mood, Reggie.
I'm just telling you. And I second the request to keep Hefner last on the docket. No, Mr. Chairman, rural Texas urgently needs more prosecutors and public defense providers. Many rural prosecutors' offices cannot recruit and retain enough staff, potentially impacting public safety. And while every Texan at risk of losing their liberty has a constitutional right to counsel, rural Texans charged with misdemeanors are 4 times less likely to have a lawyer than urban defendants. HB 4487 seeks to address this issue by creating a loan repayment program for those who hold a law degree, licensed to practice in the state of Texas, and are employed as prosecutors, public defenders, or appointed attorneys providing services in 1 or more rural counties. Rural counties would be a county with a population of 100,000 folks or less. The Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board will ultimately be responsible for determining the loan repayment amounts, but HB 4487 does set parameters to assist. Additionally, HB 4487 creates an advisory committee to make recommendations regarding rules and guidelines for this program to be effectively carried out. I appreciate your consideration this morning. Mr. Chairman, if there is testimony, I respectfully reserve the right to close and would love to answer any questions.
We will give you that right. Ms. Gonzalez.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Chairman. I really love this bill.
Good.
No, just so you know, in appropriations, TIDC has been advocating for us to do some specific funding for rural representation. I think that it's one thing for us to fund it and then not create the other mechanisms to really support the larger problem and the larger infrastructure. So I think in order to holistically address the idea, we can fund a program, but also create a pipeline so that we can sustain the program that we're trying to do. And so I think honestly, the funding we're trying to do in appropriations would matter more and the return on investment would be greater if we were also to have your bill. So I think this is, I just wanted to paint a bigger picture of the larger other pieces that are moving that also are working to address this very critical problem. So thank you.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Members? We'll call you back up to close, Mr. Smith. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you.
Chair calls Matthew Wright. Mr. Wright, good morning.
Good morning.
We show you registered as Matthew Wright, testifying on behalf of yourself and Diaz and Wright, PLLC, for the legislation.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm used to being in court. So. I'm also a judge too, and so I do have some background on this, and I am speaking in support. Did you like that, being called Your Honor? I can do that to everyone on the committee. So
not really.
I wanted to rise in support of this because this is such an important thing. Diaz and Wright is a small rural law firm located in Falls County, and we can be your proof of principle that this works. I also have a faculty appointment at Baylor University and Texas A&M School of Law, and I will tell you that without those 2 appointments, I was a senior vice president and interim CEO of a healthcare foundation. Don't ever be an interim CEO during a merger and acquisition because you will get a severance package. But without that, the reason why I bring that up is without that severance package and without my appointments, I would not have been able to found the law firm. Our law firm represents 30% of Bosque County's indigent defense, and we represent 40% of Milam County's indigent defense. We are the government lawyers for 2 cities outside of those counties, and we serve as judge in 5 jurisdictions in 3 other rural counties. And we actually have to hop over Waco in order to serve our areas and our rural communities. Just to give you an idea, there's only 7 out of 18 practicing attorneys in Falls County. 3 of them are elected, so that only leaves 4 lawyers, and out of those 4 lawyers in our county, 3 of them are in my law firm. Our firm has been trying since 2015 to create a pipeline and a training ground with resources. We are essentially the regional indigent office for CPS, probates, guardians, and then also indigent defense. We have created over 450 undergraduates to expose them to rural lawyer life. In fact, one of them is here today from Baylor University. Alex is in the gallery here today. We've had 7 interns that we have been able to push through our rural intern program that is connected with both Baylor and Texas A&M. They live and work in a town of 1,300. One of them has gone on to be an intern with the Texas Supreme Court. One of them has become a lawyer for the federal government. One of them has become a lawyer for the Texas government. And now one you'll hear from in a minute is now employed with us. And so we have also teamed up with the Texas A&M University School of Ed, and we bring high school students into it. We are in a desert. We serve a legal desert, and we actually have to hop over larger counties in order to continue to provide those services. If our firm wasn't there, if I had not had a severance, if I had not had my appointments, the student loan debt would be a burden to the point that I would not be able to have found the firm, use the firm, and then provide the resources necessary to do it. I'll leave you with one proof of principle story is that one of my first court appointments was a young woman who had pled out because she was waiting in order to get indigent defense, but CPS had removed her kids. And she was told by jailhouse lawyers, and for those of you that practice in the law, you'll understand exactly the dangers that has, that she needed to plea in order to keep her children. So she pled out to a felony, high-degree felony, because she was accused of having 5 pounds of cocaine in a Ziploc bag. She pled out to it because that was the only way for her to protect her kids. We got involved with the case as the court-appointed CPS attorneys, and we discovered that it was not 5 pounds of cocaine, it was 5 pounds of laundry detergent. And so because then we immediately put ourselves on the indigent criminal, we asked the court to appoint us. A special prosecutor was appointed, and we were able to undo all of the damage of that. But that illustrates how fast and the need is there for it. And so I am very encouraged by this bill. I wanted to tell you both as a practicing attorney and as someone that practices in nothing but rural communities, how much this is an exciting bill for us. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer any.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Members, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Chair calls Jessica Hart. Good morning. We show you registered as Jessica Hart, testifying on behalf of yourself and Diaz and Wright, PLLC, for the legislation.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Howdy. My name is Jessica Hart. I am a graduate of Texas A&M Fighting Class of Texas Aggie Class of 2018. But I am also a Texas A&M graduate of their law school in 2021. I first came to Diaz and Wright as an intern through the rural intern program that Mr. Wright spoke on a moment ago. I since then have joined the law firm as a full-time attorney. And now I am part of the statistic that there is one attorney for every 2,473 people in Falls County. I'm not only part of that statistic, I am also now a resident of Falls County. I am now a homeowner of Falls County. I work as an attorney in Falls County, and I am also an agricultural producer in Falls County. As an attorney with Diaz and Wright, our office and our attorneys, we not only represent criminal defense clients, but we also work as court-appointed ad litems in CPS, probate, and guardianship matters. This bill is important to me individually because everything about my life right now was only made possible because I had a very unique opportunity. I was able to graduate from undergrad and law school without student loans. The opportunities that are available in rural counties are extremely limited because of people's immediate debt coming out of law school. Many of my classmates from the class of 2021 couldn't even entertain the idea of a position similar to what I have now because of their student loans and the payments that they would be having to make. As I mentioned earlier, our law firm, we not only represent criminal defense clients, but we also represent CPS, probate, and guardianship cases. One example of a case that I was exposed to as an intern involved a man who was wrongfully accused, and he was imprisoned for 932 days. There were 7 DNA tests conducted during those 932 days. All of those were exonerating him. However, because of court backlog and a lack of attorneys and resources available in that county, he remained in jail for for at least 350 days after the first DNA test. That is just one example of many people that are affected by this backlog. In our CPS cases, we have worked with children that in order to receive services that are necessary for them and their protection, they are housed 3 counties away from where their services are provided. And we as the attorneys regularly go out and visit those children to make sure that they are getting the attention and the help that they need. Because of our ability to represent them as court-appointed ad litems, we were able to ensure that their legal interests were represented in court. As Mr. Wright said a little bit earlier, people are being affected every day. And being able to offer or being able to remove a barrier such as the salaries not being able to cover student loan payments would be an incredible help towards making legal services more available to the public. Thank you.
Members, Ms. Hart, thank you for being here today. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Chair calls Eric Carcerano. Good morning. We show you registered as Eric Carcerano, testifying on behalf of yourself, Chambers County District Attorney for the legislation.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Eric Carcerano. I'm Assistant District Attorney in Chambers County. I'm testifying on behalf of the Chambers County District Attorney's Office and myself in favor of the bill. I'd like to thank Chair Smith for bringing this important legislation. Chambers County, despite being a short 45-minute drive from downtown Houston, has the troubles that many other rural communities has getting lawyers out there. Our office is constantly shorthanded. Our court-appointed list is constantly shorthanded. Any help that the legislature could give us in hiring prosecutors and getting quality people on our appointment list would help us move our dockets, help us control our jail population. Chambers County is hovering right around 49,000 people. Most of those are on the suburbs of Houston and Mont Belvieu. The vast majority of the county, including Anahuac, our county seat, we're in a rural area. We just have a lot of trouble getting lawyers to come out here. And it affects our dockets, it affects our caseloads, and it affects our office. So we would appreciate anything this committee could do to help us get lawyers, help us get people, to help get us through our backlog, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. Members? No questions. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair calls Pamela Metzger.
With the chair's permission.
Yes, ma'am. You can just hand them to Mr. Flanders. Ms. Metzger, we show you registered as Pamela Metzger, testifying on behalf of yourself for the legislation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you for having me. My name is Pam Metzger. I'm the director of the Deason Criminal Justice Reform Center at the SMU Dedman School of Law. And while I'm here today in my personal capacity, I wanted to provide the committee with some background information both on the rural lawyer crisis here in Texas and on some strategies for solving it. I think that there's probably not a better case to be made in terms of storytelling than the stories we've already heard about the lives of rural Texans that are impacted every single day. But I do want to share a little bit about the size and scope of the crisis we confront. Many of you here represent the most threatened communities in terms both of the legal system's ability to provide resources for prosecutors, making sure that victims don't have undue waits, and providing resources for all Texans to have their constitutional rights met. What does that mean? It means that in 65 counties in Texas, there is not a single lawyer located in the county who took an adult criminal case off the public defense list in 2021, not a single one. What I can tell you is there are far more counties in which there are fewer than 3 lawyers who accept those kinds of cases, which means, as Representative Smith already described, that rural Texans are waiting far longer for vindication of their constitutional rights, and in many cases, being forced to abandon them because they're stuck waiting. Are they going to go home today and leave a jail cell, or are they going to wait hoping a lawyer's going to come? We place rural externs as part of this pipeline that's been described in rural communities through SMU's law school. And last summer, 2 summers ago, I had a student come to me really almost in tears and saying, I don't know what to do. I watched the lawyers I'm working with meet a young man who'd sat in jail for 3 months without seeing a lawyer because the only lawyers in town were already representing the co-defendant in that case. And so there was no one who could take his side. Rural Texans deserve better. The thing is Texas already knows how to address this problem. The Physicians Educational Loan Repayment Program works. It's a program that this board oversees that provides educational loan forgiveness for physicians who choose to move to rural or other shortage areas. We know that program works. The data show it. We also know that what we're requesting here today is a very modest investment relative to what's being put into other services like physicians. The request here is for a cohort of up to 20 lawyers, although the loan forgiveness could be spread out and scaled to accommodate more lawyers, 20 lawyers a year across an 8-year period of measuring those cohorts, which would allow us for just around $25 million to provide 20 lawyers a year to areas where there are no prosecutors. You have for you, I believe, a letter from Judge Leanne Rafferty, who can tell you that there's been instances in her jurisdiction where there were no prosecutors, defendants in jail and not a prosecutor in town to pursue the case. We can address those problems and use this as a pilot. We can study it, we can show its impacts, and then we can come back to this body and you can go back to your constituents in places like Borden and Scurry and other rural areas and tell them that we've made a commitment to making sure that rural Texans get the same quality of justice that people do in the cities. Thank you.
Members, do we have any questions? Thank you for being here. Chair calls Jeff Burkhart. Good morning. We show you registered as Jeff Burkhart, testifying on behalf of Texas Indigent Defense Commission on the legislation.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chair, Chairman, and members, my name is Jeff Burkhart. I'm the Executive Director of the Texas Indigent Defense Commission. TIDC is a state entity that funds, oversees, and works to improve public defense throughout the state of Texas. I just want to provide a little bit of background about the need here. In rural Texas, over the past 7 years, we've lost over 500 rural defense attorneys. That's 1/4 of all defense attorneys in rural Texas. Those attorneys are retiring. Many are moving to higher paying jobs as opposed to taking public defense cases. And unfortunately, some have died off. Right now, we don't have young attorneys moving to rural Texas in the numbers that we used to see. Depending on the source that you rely on, average law school debt is now between $160,000 and $200,000. Saddled with that level of debt, most young attorneys are not moving to rural Texas to hang a shingle and start their own law practice. So as a result of this, what we see at the Texas Indigent Defense Commission, we get calls on a regular basis from county judges and other judges saying, Mr. Burkhart, I understand that the person in front of me has a constitutional right to an attorney, but what would you like me to do? We don't have any attorneys in our county who can handle this case. One instance I'd bring up is Abilene. Abilene, Texas, folks there, the judges were in such a bind that they were calling defense attorneys from as far away as Fort Worth, who were driving hours to come and take the cases. The staff here at the Texas Indigent Defense Commission, we do have a few questions about the mechanics of the bill, but I think those are all surmountable issues. But overall, this is just a great bill and an excellent idea that I think will incentivize more attorneys to move to rural Texas to become prosecutors and defense attorneys. With that, I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you, sir. Members, Ms. Gonzalez?
First off, thank you for all your hard work. I appreciate everything that you do for the agency. You know what we've been working on in appropriations. If you think about the appropriations that we're working on in combination with this bill, do you feel like they're in alignment? Do you feel like they're even necessary to support each other? Like, what are your background thoughts?
Yeah, I think they're really are in alignment. I mean, what we're for everybody else, what we're talking about in House appropriations really has been incentivizing more public defender office building. Right now, the Texas Indigent Defense Commission, we're adding somewhere along the lines of 10 additional counties every year to public defender offices. Those are not a panacea, though, and it's not a right fit for every county. Not every county wants a public defender. But I think with this loan forgiveness program, whether a county wants a PD office or they want to stick with private counsel, it'll incentivize more young attorneys to move to those areas, which is absolutely what we need, and if we're going to meet the Sixth Amendment right to counsel.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, thank you for being
Thank
here
you.
today. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against HB 4487? Seeing none, Chair recognizes Mr. Smith to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate all the witnesses giving you kind of on-the-ground details of why this bill is needed. Just as a side note, I myself have spent most of my practice in rural Texas. It's been a pleasure and a privilege, but I'm from rural Texas. And so I came back home to practice law. We need to incentivize folks to put down roots in rural Texas and to practice law there, the same way we're trying to incentivize folks in the medical profession to do the same. But one thing also to remember about the need for the Sixth Amendment right to counsel in rural Texas, it's not just for rural Texans who need the defense. With our mobile society now, you have folks moving through rural Texas at all times, and many times those situations that's involved with a vehicle, that's where you have a case that arises. And so you could find yourself in rural Texas in need of counsel and not able to get it. And so that's another thing to keep in mind. But at any rate, I'd be glad to answer any questions, and I appreciate your time.
Yes, sir, Mr. Smith. Thank you. Members? Seeing none. Thank you, sir. If there's no objection, HB 4487 will be left pending. Hearing none, the bill is pending. Chair lays out HB 2594 and recognizes Ms. Ortega to explain the bill.
Good morning, Chairman Kimple and Vice Chair Paul, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to lay out House Bill 2594. A mother from El Paso contacted my office and several others and bravely shared the story of her daughter, who had just completed medical school and her residency program, and then tragically, the daughter passed away from an aggressive form of cancer before she could even start her career. Her story caused me to consider how often medical students may neglect their own health in the pursuit of caring for others, and how the state of Texas could better support these students. As the bill developed, I was also encouraged to include mental health in addition to physical health. Medical students are considered to be at higher risk for mental health disorders when compared to the general population. It is well documented that medical school can be a source of psychological and emotional stress, which often manifests itself in issues with their own physical health. House Bill 2594 would emphasize the importance of the overall health of our medical students by requiring Texas medical schools to include training regarding the importance of a physician's mental and physical health in the curriculum required for a medical degree. We need to prioritize our medical students' health as they are dedicated, as they have dedicated their lives to the future of Texans' health care. I have one witness here from El Paso to testify, and I reserve the right to close.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. Chair calls Karen Wright. Sorry, good morning. Thank you for being here. We show you registered as Karen Wright, testifying on behalf of yourself for the legislation. Is that correct?
Should I do that?
Yeah, you can break
Can
it
you
if you
hear me?
wish. I don't.
Okay. All right, I'm a retired teacher. I assume you can hear me.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to thank Representative Lena Ortega. I'd like to thank each of you for allowing me to be here. And I'd like for us to think about treating our aspiring doctors as valuable assets. I think a first step, or a good first step, would be that self-care course where the cobbler makes his own children some shoes, the beautician does her own hair, where they take care of themselves the way they take care of others. The Uniformed Services University, it's a military institution, conducted a 4-year study on what happens to medical school students during their 4 years of school. The first year, they found that their medical school students were stronger, healthier, happier, more satisfied with their lives. But the findings showed that as medical school went along, a terrible toll was taken in their life satisfaction, in their fitness, in their nutrition. And finally, the Uniformed Services University reported that medical schools should incorporate student wellness as a normal routine in their curriculum. These health declines are due to the demands that are extraordinary. They accrue enormous debt through their tuition by borrowing funds to live on while they're unable to make a living, meeting competition that they're equal, perhaps for the first time ever, the intense work, study, and testing that's relentless, competing obligations in medical school and residency, but even in medical school, I can remember that they were volunteering health fairs in the community, speaking to high school students, forming organizations on high school campuses, as well as their very own work. Did you know that it's possible to spend 100 hours a week for 3 weeks in a row without violation? You can spend 24 hours straight on your feet as long as there's an attending physician available. For example, in Europe, there's a 48-hour per week regulation. And among American kids, if you get 2 days off in a row, it's called a golden weekend. They're not going to spend that golden weekend looking for a physical or self-care. No wonder there are mental health concerns. Over the course of their training, 43% of our medical students and residents suffer depression. 74% burnout. And this extrapolates to the fellows, the attending physicians, and also into doctors in private practice. Depressed residents are also 6.2 times more likely to make a medical error in prescribing your medication. At the same time that we're wishing that they would see a doctor, consult someone for an evaluation, receive treatment, Our licensing agents demand the revelation of any mental services that have been provided. Medical students, I don't have numbers for residents, but medical students are 3 times more likely to die of suicide than their peers. You wonder, well, were there really that many suicides? The Accreditation Council for Graduate Medical Education studied 324 residents who died in residency. The leading cause was cancer, the second suicide. It turned out that women in residency who died of cancer, and the men died of suicide. Although I've given you some numbers for the mental health, there are absolutely no research numbers available to the public at least, on young women residents who die of cancer. And therefore, I'm going to give you my daughter's story quickly. She was healthy. She went to CrossFit. She ate correctly. She had a good social life. She was happily married. She graduated in the top 15% of her class at Texas Tech in Lubbock, was a member of AOA, and received 5 cards at graduation, whatever that meant. In residency, she was willing to fill in for others. She never asked for an extension. She served on the front lines during COVID. She graduated on time, and not all of the people in her residency program did. 9 days after her Zoom graduation, she had moved to El Paso, where she was about to begin a job. She was unable to hold food down, walk alone, sleep, or bathe by herself. 25 days later, the first day that she should have been a well-compensated doctor at Las Palmas Medical Center, she received a diagnosis of 4th stage adenocarcinoma, which had spread to the liver, the bones, and later we discovered the brain. 26 days later than that, she was dead. Her MD Anderson doctor said that she had been sick the entire residency and the last year of medical school. And yet she had functioned without any symptoms. The only thing that would have saved her would have been an early physical. So these aspiring doctors who are young and inexperienced are still students. They should be shielded. They should be taught self-care. They should be treated with respect. And especially in a state where we've been hearing all morning about shortages in every area. But I have found that 230 Texas counties are short of doctors, which accounts for 7.5 million Texans being without doctor services. Also, the Texas legislature every 2 years has provided $777 million in funds to accommodate the shortcomings from the tuition. And every time someone dies or is unable to function, that money is lost. And also the money that is loaned to them for tuition and for living is also lost. In my daughter's case, she was frugal and had a husband who worked and only borrowed $125,000 that was lost. I believe that we need to provide very proactive self-care in the form of a course, short on lectures, they don't need much more talking, but heavy on prevention, medical history, perhaps their family history, which would have helped my child. The execution of available resources, as in the free medical physicals that are available, peer-to-peer monitoring, because I think the health of our students, although they're young adults, they are still students, and it must go hand in hand with their serving the well-being of the patients all over Texas. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, ma'am. Members? Ms. Gonzalez?
Good morning. Thank you for being here. And first of all, just our condolences and thank you to your family and to your daughter. It's just heartbreaking to hear your story. As you know, we have Texas Tech Medical School in El Paso, and I know our leadership there does really much care about their students, but I think institutionalizing what you're trying to do, make sure that there's not a gap. And so I just want to say thank you for using your story to create policy.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, ma'am, thank you for being here today. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wish to testify on for or against HB 2594? Seeing none, Chair recognizes Ms. Ortega.
I'm also happy to answer any questions. And if there are no questions, I close and I ask that you report House Bill 2594 favorably out of committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. If there's no objection, HB 2594 will be left pending. Hearing none, 2594 is pending. Chair lays out HB 4315.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Recognize Mr. Hefner. Ms. Hefner, you have a committee sub, is that correct?
That's correct.
Representative Paul offers committee substitute for HB 4315. Go ahead, Mr. Hefner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members, for hearing our bill today. HB 4315, relating to participation in the Joint Admission Medical Program of the Medical School at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Tyler. We're very proud of this new medical school in East Texas and would like for it to participate in the program known as JAMP. Established by the legislature in 2001, the Joint Admission Medical Program is a workforce pipeline program that assists highly qualified undergraduate students from low socioeconomic backgrounds to enter medical school. Participating students are identified in their sophomore year of college and are provided resources such as mentorships, internship experiences, and MCAT preparation courses. JAMP participants who successfully meet rigorous program requirements are guaranteed admission to a participating Texas medical school. Under current law, all existing public medical schools in Texas participate in JAMP, except for the recently established medical school at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Tyler. Committee substitute to 4315 expands the list of participating JAMP medical schools to include the medical school at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Tyler and specifies the timeline for which the institution will begin participating in the program. As the chairman mentioned, we have a committee substitute. The committee substitute for House Bill 4315 just moves back one academic year from 2024 and 25 to 25-26, the date for which the Tyler Medical School will be providing internships and memberships in this program. We have a couple of witnesses here. Answer any questions y'all may have, and I reserve the right to close.
Thank you, Mr. Hefner. We'll get you back up. Chair calls Brigham Willis. Thank you for being here. We show you registered as Brigham Willis, testifying on behalf of UT Tyler School of Medicine on the legislation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman Kimple and members of the committee. I have the privilege of serving as the inaugural dean of the UT Tyler School of Medicine, and I'm honored to come before you today to briefly tell you about our school and the work we're doing to recruit promising medical students from all walks of life. We're the newest medical school in Texas. We're incredibly excited to welcome our first class of medical students this June to begin their medical education. Even more exciting, thanks to the support of generous donors, our first 2 classes of students will attend medical school without paying any tuition or fees for the entire 4 years. We're building the school from the ground up to meet the unique needs of rural and medically underserved areas of East Texas. A major part of the strategy is how we recruit students. We seek students who are community-focused, dedicated to primary care, East Texas, and underserved areas of the state, passionate about systems-level change, and oriented toward preventive care. Participating in JAMP will fit squarely into our mission to recruit a highly qualified broad pool of candidates that are uniquely oriented toward serving the areas of our state with the highest need. Joining JAMP is a natural step in our development of a medical school, and we'd be honored to do so. HB 4315 would accomplish that goal while giving us adequate time to mature as an institution before beginning our participation in the program. Thank you again for your time this morning, and I thank you to Representative Hefner for authoring this important bill. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Willis, thank you. Members, no questions. Thank you for being here. Chair calls Joel Robles. Mr. Robles, we show you testified as Joel Robles, testifying on behalf of Joint Admission Medical Program on the legislation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Thank you, sir.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of this committee. My name is Joel Robles. I am the Program Director for the Joint Admission Medical Program. Here to serve as a resource witness on the bill and happy to answer any questions.
Members, thank you for doing that. Appreciate
Yes,
it. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against HB 4315? Seeing none, Chair recognizes Mr. Hefner to close on his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Thank you all for hearing the bill today. I don't know if it'd be appropriate, but we'd love for this to go on local and consent if you see fit.
Yes, sir.
And I close.
Thank you, sir. The committee substitute for HB 4315 is withdrawn. If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Hearing none, HB 4315 is pending. Chair lays out HB 3930 and recognizes Representative Bryant to explain his bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee for the hearing on this bill. As you know, Texas has a significant problem with the nursing shortage. And I won't elaborate on that because I know this committee is well aware of it already, and you've addressed it significantly with money for formal education of nurses. The problem is that the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board study and several other studies have identified an additional barrier to addressing this nursing shortage, and that's the lack of clinical training capacity. It is a primary obstacle to educating more nurses. This bill would address that by creating 4 grant programs supporting nurse education and training administered by the coordinating board. First, to support the use of preceptors who are mentors or teachers that take on the job of helping and supervising other nurses along with their existing duties. Also, innovation pilot programs that will support nursing and improve retention of nurses and address workplace safety. A third grant program would be for qualified nursing staff to serve as part-time nurse faculty. And the fourth would be for additional clinical training for nursing faculty who want to work at a clinical setting part-time. This is funded by an HB1 rider for $153.8 million for the biennium. It would be administered, as I said a moment ago, by the Higher Education Coordinating Board. And the example of recipients of these grants would be hospitals, nursing homes, long-term care facilities, residential care facilities, primary care settings, and rehabilitation facilities. This bill is supported by the Texas Hospital Association, the Teaching Hospitals of Texas, the Texas Association of Community Health Plans, the Children's Hospital Association of Texas, and others. And I think we have witnesses here to give you a little better, fuller picture of this proposal.
Yes, sir, Mr. Bryant. Thank you. We'll bring you back up to close. Oh, excuse me, Ms. Howard.
Thank you.
Mr. Bryant? We have a question for you.
Actually, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank you for bringing this. Clearly, this has been a huge issue for a long time and continues to be a challenge in terms of getting more nurses through the pipeline to address the shortage. So I just wanted to basically thank you for bringing that.
Thank you. Thanks for your comments.
Thank you. Chair calls Elise Meyer. Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman and members. My name is Elise Meyer, VP of Advocacy with Leading Age Texas in support of HB 3930. Our organization advocates for nonprofit aging services providers, including long-term care settings and nursing homes. The overall impact of the statewide nursing shortage is well known, and we appreciate all the legislature is doing to address it this session. However, nursing homes and long-term care settings have been disproportionately impacted. And since the start of the pandemic, the recent studies confirm the problem has only worsened. Nursing homes are reporting an 18% decrease in the number of nurses employed in our facilities. And the 2022 long-term care nurse staff study shows Texas nursing homes reporting the highest vacancy rates for RNs across all settings. The insufficient number of clinical sites to support the required hands-on training presents a major roadblock to strengthening the pipeline. So this bill is critical if we want to rebuild the nursing workforce. We must invest in growing clinical capacity and preceptors that support students and lead them through their clinical training. Training should also be diverse, exposing students to various healthcare settings and patients. Currently, only 2.5% of Texas nursing students' clinical experience is conducted in a long-term care setting or a nursing facility. And only about half of the nursing programs in Texas have a long-term care clinical partner. Non-hospital-based settings like nursing facilities often lack the necessary staff and resources to support students. And this lack of exposure to high-quality long-term care providers makes it difficult to recruit newly graduated nurses. This bill will enable our members to serve as clinical partners, which will enrich the clinical experience, but also improve recruitment, retention, and quality care in nursing homes. By recognizing and incentivizing the work of nurse preceptors, increasing supports and funding for clinical sites, and encouraging collaboration between nursing programs and clinical sites, we can grow clinical capacity across Texas, allowing more nurses to complete the necessary training and enter the workforce more quickly. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Howard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to concur with what you have said, too. I just actually this weekend was visiting parents in memory care here in Austin, and certainly there, and I interacted with a nurse while I was there, actually. There's all kinds of opportunities for clinical experiences in the long-term care setting, and it would really open up the possibilities here. So thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, ma'am. Chair calls Maureen Milligan.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Maureen Milligan. I'm with the Teaching Hospitals of Texas, and I'm here to testify in strong support of the bill. We appreciate Representative Bryant for bringing up this bill, Rep. Howard for joint authoring the bill. The recent surveys have shown that about 100,000 RNs left the nurse workforce during the pandemic, and about a quarter of currently employed nurses plan to leave by 2027. So the nurse crisis, as you all know, is real, it's critical, and it's getting worse. We've worked with nurse executives in the teaching hospitals of Texas around the state, and they strongly support this bill and the strategic investment strategy behind it. As you've heard, investments today largely focus on schools of nursing, and that kind of makes sense when you think about a nursing shortage. You think, oh, let's invest in the schools of nursing. And that's an important part of the solution, but it's not enough because the clinical capacity issue is the primary obstacle to training more nurses. So this bill invests in that clinical training capacity. About a third of a nurse's student's time is spent in a clinical site. So if there's not clinical sites, they can't do the necessary clinical training they need to graduate and to be qualified to take care of students. So that's an important part. This is kind of like the GME program that the legislature has invested in for about the last 10 years. You remember that there weren't sufficient clinical capacity in graduate medical education. And so we were losing physicians in Texas going to other states. GME program now supplies the clinical capacity for those graduate medical education. This does something similar in nursing insofar as that clinical capacity is needed, again, to graduate nurses and to bring them into the nurse workforce. The other thing this bill does is it supports nurses once they've graduated. We know there's this thing called this complexity experience gap. With a lot of the baby boomer nurses leaving, you have a lot of the experienced nurses actually leaving the workforce. So you have fewer experienced nurses to train the new graduates and the younger nurses. So this bill also focuses on retention of nurses and supporting nurses. So how does it do that? One, it has funding for preceptors. So preceptors are the people, the nurses who one-on-one take a student and train them in everything they do through the course of the day. So they do that with students. So you've heard about the stresses of the pandemic that have caused so many nurses to leave. And I think Dr. Brock will come up after me and talk a little bit about this, but imagine being a kind of a stressed nurse, maybe you're hanging on, and then someone asks you to please precept a nursing student. So take someone with you and do everything you do during the course of your day and show them. Nurses do this, and so what this bill would do is just recognize that additional work they do with a $4 per hour preceptor bump to their regular salary. And mostly it recognizes them and the work that they're doing, and it hopefully will help retain them and incentivize them to do preceptor work. So precepting is one component of what Rep. Bryant is proposing. The second thing is innovation grants. So much innovation in education, but right now those there are innovation grants. They only go to schools of nursing, though, so this would broaden it and make them available to clinical sites where there's lots of innovation like staffing models, grow your own, how to take somebody maybe from housekeeping who wants to get into a clinical career, help give them a lift so they can start doing those kinds of things. So lots of innovation opportunities. Two other things this bill does. It supplies funding for nurses who say part-time, they want to teach 10 hours a week, say, but maybe a community college can't afford them, the schools of nursing can't afford them. So this bill actually funds the payment that would go to those nurses who work, say, part-time, evenings and weekends. It also provides a little bit of a clinical refresh to faculty who decide, maybe I should go back and do a little bit more clinical work, and that helps in terms of the coordination between the end user, the clinical site, the long-term care facility, the hospital, or the other clinical site, and the schools of nursing. So that's the fourth component, and we know that that kind of coordination between end users and educational programs, Commissioner Keller has talked about that quite a bit, and so this would also support that coordination. It's one of the three top issues identified by nurses. Did want to point out that nurse faculty surveys identify that lack of clinical space is the primary obstacle to growing the student bodies, and that's been the case for about 12 years now. So I think with that, I'll close and be happy to answer any questions you might have. I appreciate your support of this and you for bringing the bill.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Chair calls Heather De La Garza. Good morning. We have you registered as Heather De La Garza, testifying on behalf of Texas Hospital Association for the bill.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
Correct. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members. My name is Heather De La Garza, and I'm the Assistant General Counsel for the Texas Hospital Association. I'm proud to testify this morning on behalf of THA and its more than 650 members in support of HB 3930. As we've already heard, hospitals are experiencing significant workforce shortages, especially among nurses. We are seeing growing vacancy rates for nursing positions, posted positions remaining vacant for over 2 months on average, and the reduction of services in many hospitals as a result of these shortages. These challenges present an unsustainable situation that threatens hospitals' ability to care for Texans. DSHS reports that Texas's RN programs rejected over 28,000 qualified applicants in the last 2 years alone because of a lack of clinical spaces and faculty, precisely the issues that this bill addresses. 73% of RN programs that turn away qualified applicants do so due to a lack of clinical space, as we just heard. This bill authorizes a grant program to increase the number of clinical sites across a variety of settings and improving the quality of nursing education. 57% of programs rejecting qualified student applicants did so because they could not identify qualified faculty to fill positions. This bill creates a program to incentivize qualified clinical nursing staff to serve as part-time faculty as well. Further, the bill creates a program to incentivize clinical sites to employ nursing faculty, helping education programs retain their faculty and promoting the integration of didactic and clinical curriculum. Hospitals know that provider workforce shortages won't be solved immediately. To that end, THA supports HB 3930 as another arrow in Texas's quiver, along with the Nursing Shortage Reduction Program, the Nurse Faculty Loan Repayment Program, workplace violence prevention legislation, and the nurse scholarships proposed by this legislature, among others, to address this shortage. This legislature has shown the will and the motivation to take significant steps to ensure a robust nursing workforce for future Texans. THA thanks Representative Bryant and the other members of the legislature for these efforts and the opportunity to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for being here, members. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair calls Jacqueline Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Ms. Brock, we show you registered as Jacqueline Brock, testifying on behalf of yourself and the teaching hospitals of Texas for the legislation.
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sorry for jumping the gun.
No, that's all right.
Excited.
It is exciting.
It is. My name is Jackie Brock, and I'm the Chief Nurse Executive at Harris Health System. I'm representing the teaching hospitals of Texas and testifying in support of House Bill 3930. I would like to thank Representative Bryant for bringing this important bill. My institution, Harris Health System in Houston, Texas, has a workforce that exceeds 15,000. That is inclusive of Baylor College of Medicine and UT Houston's affiliated medical staff. We are the essential public health care system that champions better health for the entire community. We focus on the low-income, uninsured, and underinsured patients through acute primary care, wellness, disease management, and population health. This bill addresses the primary obstacle that we're facing right now in increasing our number of nursing student graduates, and that's with student clinical placement. The clinical training that is required has to be done in a healthcare setting. Our state has done an excellent job in augmenting clinical training, especially through the pandemic with simulation. But there is a certain amount of this that must be done with real patients in live settings. It can be done in hospitals or other care settings, as you've heard mentioned here today. And this training is provided one-on-one by the bedside nurse. This nurse has a primary patient assignment, whether it's in a hospital or in a clinic or anywhere else, but they have their primary duty and responsibility to the patient, and then they accept the responsibility and the additional burden of teaching a nursing student. I will tell you that on average, having a nursing student slows a nurse down. Everything takes at least 3 times longer. And so for a nurse, that is significant, trying to complete the work, because we don't lighten their load when they take a nursing student. We can't do that. That's not part of the model that we can support. So these nurses do this out of the goodness of their heart and the contribution to their profession and the expectation of working in a teaching hospital, but they generally don't get compensated for this additional work or the extra labor. So where this bill directly supports the fact that we would be able to incentivize these nurses and reward the preceptors for this additional work, and hopefully then increase the number that would be willing to accept nursing students. We are expanding beyond just the regulars, which would be normal daytime work shifts, off shifts, weekend shifts. I will tell you that when I started as a nurse a couple of minutes ago, I only had to precept maybe a third of the time that I was on duty. We are asking our nurses to do this every day, every shift. If they come in and work an overtime shift, we ask them to do it then too. So it's gone far beyond just being a part of the job. It's a significant component of the job. So from my perspective as a leader in nursing, I would love the opportunity to be able to compensate them for this contribution that they're making to our future workforce. This bill also provides clinical site innovation grant funding to help us support and retain the nurses we have. Bringing new nurses in the front door is not going to help us if they keep going out the back door at a faster rate. So in order to keep the nurses in our workforce and keep them healthy and resilient within our workforce, we need some funds that will help us create innovative programs, processes, workflows, use of technology, everything that we can put in that work environment to retain our nurses, to give them the most tools they can to be successful and to continue to want to make that contribution. This bill will also help by creating and funding not only just additional sites, but a lot of this innovation, as you mentioned, we don't want to take any of the money away that's going to academia. They need every penny they've ever received. We don't want anything. This needs to complement so that we can collaborate with them. We want to build innovative programs that complement what happens once they come out of nursing school and are in our clinical sites so that they can continue to provide this critical patient care and help us with the retention. As you've heard mentioned, one of the big things that we want to see and support, and we have interest in, is our nurses that work at the bedsides regularly also teaching in the classroom. They could teach at the bedside as the clinical instructor, in addition to just teaching at the bedside as a preceptor. They could also teach in the classroom. But the challenge that we have now of getting the nurses from the clinical environment to those education settings is that they can't afford to pay them effectively. So we want this grant to also, this funding to also help support that. And we welcome our academic colleagues coming into our clinical environments and working alongside of us and providing direct patient care. So that also builds and supports their skill set and their ability and enjoyment in working with the students. So classroom and clinical components are both important. They have to have both, so we have to work together, and I think this bill supports that. I also want to emphasize that this is not just about big hospital systems like me in the urban centers. We've talked to the deans of nursing schools and leaders in small centers. We want this to apply to every healthcare setting, long-term, acute care, rehab, all of the clinical sites that qualify as a clinical teaching opportunity for a nursing student to be in, we want this to apply. So urban and rural, critical access hospitals, as well as the large level 1 trauma systems. There is learning and opportunities for every nursing student in all of those environments. And so we really want to make this inclusive and comprehensive. So we appreciate your support. You're in considering the strategic investment, and I'm happy to try to answer any questions.
Mr. Brock, thank you for being here. Members, thank you for being here, ma'am. Is there anyone else wish to testify on for against HB 3930? Hearing none, Chair recognizes Mr. Bryant to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just point out that these grants will be in good hands with the coordinating board, and the recipients are certainly meritorious recipients, and I think this would be put to good use in addressing a very serious problem that we have right now, and I appreciate you letting me come before you. I close.
Yes, sir, Mr. Bryant, thank you. There's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Hearing none, HB 3930 is pending. Chair lays out HB 2596 and recognizes Representative Frazier to explain his bill. Ms. Frazier, you have a substitute, is that correct?
I don't.
Excuse me?
Yeah, we don't have a substitute. No, we do not have a substitute for this. That was the first I heard of that, so that's, you caught me off guard.
We do. We do have a substitute. Do you want to lay the substitute out or the bill out?
Well,
let's lay the substitute out.
Let's lay the substitute out.
Okay. If we have questions on that, we'll come back to it. Anyway,
Yeah,
Representative Rainey offers committee substitute HB 2596.
All right. Thank you, Chairman and members. This is a Hazelwood Act for House Bill 2596, a Hazelwood Act for the National Guard. In the recent years, in Texas National Guard and Air National Guard have been pulled away from their families and livelihoods to protect the state of Texas in several different capacities, most notably Operation Lone Star, which at one point have seen over 10,000 National Guardsmen activate with the mission to protect our Texas borders. This mission was a response to the dramatic influx in the migrant caravans and at the Texas-Mexico border. Texas National Guard and Air Guard played a critical role in providing security for our communities of Texas. Many of these services have spent more than a year serving in an official capacity on behalf of the state of Texas to protect our cities for the border and all that's going on down there. Simply what this bill does is give them the credits that they would get if they were going out, if they were pulled away from their duties to serve overseas and such, which they have in the past. This gives them ability to go to our state schools, and I do have testimony from two different individuals that are going to be up here in just a second, and they can explain the lengthy of access of what we're trying to accomplish with this bill to give our servicemen and women that are down there protecting our border. So I'll stand until I close, and I'll let the witnesses come up, please.
Members, anybody got questions for Representative Frazier? All right, sir, we'll get back to you. The House calls Pedro Salas. Sir, we have you down as Pedro Salas. You're representing yourself, and you're for the bill.
Yes, sir.
Okay, proceed.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, esteemed members of this committee, I am Pedro Solis. I am representing myself and testifying for HB 2596 as a U.S. Army and National Guard veteran who I received both GI Bill and Hazelwood, the Hazelwood Act assistance for my educational career. So since March of 2020, we stepped into an unprecedented time. Numerous National Guardsmen and Air National Guard men and women were activated as part of the Corona response teams and Operation Lone Star, as stated by Representative Frazier. For these efforts in serving and protecting not only the state, but the nation's interests as well, right, in part with Operation Lone Star, we should show our appreciation to our Texas service members by giving them access to use the Hazelwood Act, which already entails that you have to serve over 180 plus days on active duty. These are 180 plus days of active duty that makes service members put their personal lives, their professional lives, their education, and their family time aside for service to us. Everyone thanks the veteran. This will say thank you and actually do something for our Texas service members. In closing, unprecedented times should have unprecedented support. I think this would be wonderful for all our service members. Thank you for your time and consideration of this legislation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Lees, thank you. Members, thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else wishing to testify on for or against HB 2596? Seeing none, Chair recognizes Mr. Frazier to close on his bill.
Chairman, members, apologies for the substitute piece. I'm going to chalk that up to being a freshman and having a rookie LD. Oh. So.
What's under the bus look like?
Yeah. So, hey, we have a great staff in our office.
Yeah, you better.
I tease them.
Yeah.
I tease them all the time, but Finn is a National Guardist that did a full year deployment, and so I can't think of more of him and what the National Guard's been doing. Is this a good save point? What they've been doing on our border, and that was one of the big reasons we pulled on Finn to do a lot of the work on this, because we didn't understand a lot of it, and he's been living it. And so the men and women that are down there living in that life right now do deserve a little bit more where we can get back to them. So I appreciate your time, and I close.
Mr. Frazier, we have one question.
Okay.
Thank you. Very supportive of what you're trying to do here. I just wanted to ask you about the budgetary implications in terms of.
I'm glad you asked
Yeah.
that. So we asked for the impact report, and right now that cannot be determined at this time. And so that's what we.
So typically what has happened is these costs have been, for Hazelwood, have been absorbed by the higher education institutions.
Yes, ma'am.
Without as much support from the state. Did you have anything that you put forth in the appropriations process or not?
We did not, and that's something that we wish we would have looked at sooner on that. But when we got this back and we saw there was no implication, we were like, okay, well, let's push this as far as we can right now and try to get the benefit going and try to get it as far as we can across this finish line.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
Members? None? Ms. Frazier, thank you.
Thank you. Thank y'all for your time.
Yep. Committee substitute is withdrawn. If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Hearing none, HB 2596 is pending. Chair lays out HB 1574. Recognizes Ms. Harris.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members, or afternoon,
And
whatever
we're
it is now.
close. You're still morning.
Okay, awesome. Just wanted to start by saying I have a rock star staff, and that's why this layout will be fantastic. Just want to say that.
He put that on a tee for me, didn't he?
Yes, sir.
I'd just like to say my staff is outstanding.
Yes, thank you, Melva, if you're in here. Mr. Chairman and members, HB 1574 requires any institution of higher education that provides priority registration for any group of students to include parenting students as a group who may do so also, so that student parents can ensure that their class schedules align with the hours they have access to childcare. By reducing one of the additional barriers to academic success faced by student parents, this bill will help student parents stay in college and finish their degrees, which helps better set up their young families for success. Moreover, this benefits the Texas economy by reducing one of the barriers faced by some of the Texans who desire to continue their education through reskilling and upskilling. Thank you, members. I respectfully reserve my right to close.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Members, do we have any questions? No, we'll call you back up to close. Chair calls Samantha Farnsworth. Thank you for being here today. We have you registered as Samantha Farnsworth, testifying on behalf of yourself and Texas Right to Life for the legislation.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, still for 2 minutes. Mr. Chairman and committee, my name is Samantha Farnsworth. I'm a legislative associate with Texas Right to Life, and we are here in favor of House Bill 1574. We are currently in our first legislative session following the overturning of Roe v. Wade. This victory means there's going to be a lot more moms and a lot more babies, many of whom will be feeling very lost in this new world without abortion, which has also told them for decades they cannot have a child and complete their education at the same time. It does not have to be this way, but the way that the system is currently set up, many parenting students feel very left behind by their colleges and their universities. So now more than ever, these families need us to have their backs. One simple way that we can show up for parenting students is to allow them to register early for their classes. This would give them the flexibility to fit their class schedule around the already demanding schedule of a parent. This way, they can give each of these tasks of being a student and being a parent the time and attention that they need and deserve. This bill wouldn't require any schools that don't currently have an early class registration mechanism to create that mechanism. It would simply require that those schools that already offer this accommodation to like athletes or to other student groups to offer that to parenting students, who are one of the most important subcategories of our students in our colleges. Getting an education is one of the most important stepping stones in success and independence for young people and for parents. It gives them more opportunities to find careers which allow them to provide for their families. Making education more accessible promotes long-term success and thriving for these families. We cannot allow pregnancy or parenting to be a barrier or to present as a disability when it comes to getting an education and completing that education. Nobody should have to choose between getting an education and being a parent, and the state of Texas should promote that. This is one simple yet critical step in building a Texas that's truly and honestly pro-life. Thank you for allowing me to testify today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wish to testify on for against HB 1574? Seeing none, chair recognizes Ms. Harris.
Thank you, members. And just on a personal note, I worked full-time while I got my master's degree, and it was very difficult to find classes that fit with my work schedule, even going to professors and asking them specifically for a spot in the class. I even wasn't 100% successful in that avenue. And I had a lot of colleagues that had kids that faced even more challenges than just working, childcare, stuff like that. So I'd appreciate your favorable consideration, and I would love for this to go to local and consent calendar, and I close.
Ms. Harris, thank you. There's no objection. HB 1574 will be left pending. Hearing no objection, the bill is pending. Chair lays out HB 3619 and recognizes Mr. Burrows to explain the bill. That you can do it right there where you're comfortable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. Texas is the top crude oil and natural gas producing state in the nation, accounting for 43% of the nation's crude oil production and 25% of its marketed natural gas production. Oil and natural gas represents nearly a third of Texas's GDP and funds more than 10% of the state's budget. The burgeoning fossil fuel discrimination movement is denying capital to our responsible, hardworking energy businesses, which means the energy we will need will be less affordable and less secure. Along with this, investment and pension managers who invest based on political trends undermine their fiduciary duty and threaten our workers and retirees' futures. Last session, we passed SB 13, which prohibits Texas state agencies that invest funds from investing with financial companies that boycott energy companies. The law as written does not apply to the Permanent University Fund, the National Research University Fund, or the governing boards at our institutions of higher education. House Bill 3619 adds these provisions to law to ensure our institutions of higher education are unable to invest with companies that boycott energy companies in Texas. Members, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. We do have some witnesses, I believe, who are going to testify.
Members, have any questions for Chairman Burrows? Seeing none. Chair calls Chase Martin. Ms. Martin, we show you registered as Chase Martin, testifying on behalf of Opportunity Solutions Project for the legislation.
Yes, Chairman, that's right. Thank you. Chairman Kemple, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of House Bill 3619. My name is Chase Martin, and I'm a visiting fellow at the Opportunity Solutions Project. OSP is a nonprofit, nonpartisan advocacy organization that seeks to enhance individuals' path to self-sufficiency. As this committee is aware, the Texas legislature established the National Research University Fund, the NRUF, to raise Texas public universities to national research prominence in higher education. Through the NRUF, Texas graduate programs have become some of the best institutions in the country for research and education. However, environmental, social, and governance investing, or ESG, is putting the future of those programs in jeopardy. You know, we're going to hear, and we might hear some more, a number of different definitions of ESG today, but here's the bottom line. ESG is a practice that lines the pockets of political operatives at the expense of Texas's prosperity. The bill before you today works to get politics out of the NRUF. Now, just how big of a problem is ESG? Nearly $233 billion in U.S. educational institutions' assets are devoted to addressing climate change or reducing carbon emissions. But managers of university endowments have a fiduciary duty to maximize the return on investment to keep higher education financially healthy, not finance political activism. Alarmingly, when surveyed, not even half of endowment and foundation adopters of ESG criteria believe those investment strategies will actually enhance financial returns. Now, while ESG assets make up a substantial portion of university endowments, here's the real issue. ESG is a losing investment. ESG investing typically yields lower returns and it does not achieve its stated social goals. A recent study demonstrated that out of 20,000 mutual funds, representing $8 trillion, regular funds outperformed ESG funds every time. Time and again, ESG funds underperform the S&P 500. Last year, the 10 largest ESG funds all suffered double-digit losses. And ESG money managers typically charge 40% more in fees to their clients. We can already see the impact ESG has had on the financial health of university endowments. Less than a year after Harvard University announced it would begin divesting from fossil fuels, the university's endowment suffered a more than $2 billion loss, nearly 2% of the endowment. Texas cannot afford to allow activists to hijack and deplete funding for its elite higher education programs. Now, why should Texas pass these reforms, and this bill in particular? The financial futures of Texas future workers, teachers, and innovators are not slush funds for political activists. If a private investor wants to lose money by promoting a social cause they care about, that's their business. But we shouldn't sacrifice higher education's driving force for innovation and prosperity to serve one side of the political aisle. You have a great opportunity here to help lead the way by banning ESG in the NRUF, protecting education, and the Texas economy, both today and for years to come. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you, sir. Members, do we have any questions? Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Is there anyone else wish to testify on for or against HB 3619? I'm sorry. Yeah. For 3619, if not, Chair recognizes Chairman Burrows to close.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, this is a great bill, and I close.
Can I ask you something?
Yes, absolutely.
Ms. Howard.
I'm asking him.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I understand what the witness that just talked about said, that these are, private decisions that businesses can make. And the assumption here is that when public funds, though, are impacted by it, then that's where I think you're suggesting we would step in.
That is correct.
Do you see that this can be on either side of an ideological divide, though, that businesses can make decisions for all kinds of ideological reasons and for all kinds of reasons that are best for their particular clients?
And I do understand that, and if this bill prohibited those businesses from making those decisions, I think it'd be problematic, right? I mean, you have the right to compete on the left or the right, or for money from the left or the right, however you want to. That's free market, absolutely. But when we're choosing where to put state resources and who to invest with, I think we're trying to develop a policy that says we should not invest with those that basically are trying to shut down oil and gas industry. And I think this is particularly unique because if we're talking about the Permanent University Fund, most of that wealth comes from mineral interests in West Texas and oil and gas. And for us to take that money and give it to investment strategists who are essentially trying to devalue those mineral interests, I think is particularly problematic. I mean, we're a unique state with our oil and gas industry, and this is meant to basically protect it from those who'd want to shut it down.
Yeah, and there's a whole lot to talk about there and a lot of different policies that I know we're looking at here in terms of how we want to be investing in all kinds of energy sources, including oil and gas. Do you have any information, though, that indicates that what the financial impact would be to our not investing in some of these companies in terms of, and I believe there was something that the comptroller reported, I don't have it in front of me, in terms of a loss for doing the same kind of action with other funds, state funds?
I don't know that there is. I mean, clearly what we know is we passed the bill last session, SB 14. The comptroller, identified those money market managers who basically have a stated strategy of, not investing in oil and gas. And from that, we have divested our interests in that. And I don't know that they have performed, any worse. In fact, maybe better, but I don't know what the report of that is. I mean, but there is certainly one or two investment managers who, they didn't come testify here today, but I know have probably worked behind the scenes to try and stop this because obviously they want the money and the fees off of, those investments.
I do appreciate what you're trying to do here, and I think that there is value in talking about protecting the interests of our state, obviously. At the same time, even though you are talking just about public funds as opposed to telling private what they can do, it is, I think, it seems a bit of an overstep to me in terms of assuming that the fiduciary responsibility of these businesses would be to their bottom line. And that this is suggesting that because they've made some kind of a decision that may have all kinds of reasons that they've made that decision, that we're going to tell them that we're not going to work with them if it looks to us like it's not in our best interest.
Well, I think that's kind of 2 points there. I think that's kind of what the witness was, first trying to explain is, I'm all for capitalism. I want my investment manager to make as much money as possible. But when we have a stated goal other than making money, which is what we have here, there is a conflict to that. But I also think Texas is particularly unique because of how important our oil and gas industry is. And it's clearly targeted by these big investment firms that do not have a huge Texas presence. I mean, they're largely on the East Coast and have made this decision. And in some ways, I think we're defending ourselves by basically saying we're not going to support those who are trying to shut down our oil and gas industries.
And I would just suggest, and you and I can talk about this more later, but I would just suggest that the investment firms are making their decisions on what they believe the market is telling them we're moving toward and what they think is going to be the best investments for them, and that probably, despite the fact that we all think we're the best here in Texas, they're not really looking at doing something to us as much as they're looking at their bottom line and where they think the market is going.
Maybe it's going to renewables, maybe it's not. But I mean, if we have an investment strategy and investment managers said, you know what, we are not going to invest in Texas-based oil and gas companies, which is a significant part of our economy, why should we give them our money? I mean, that's somewhat discriminatory against us and against our own best interest.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Burrows, I think what you're trying to get at is that the word I was looking for, and you said right there, we don't want to invest our state's monies or our citizens' money into entities that do discriminatory practices. That wouldn't sound like something would be good that Texas does. Is that kind of what your goal is?
That is exactly it. I think that we are intricately tied to the oil and gas industry. I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the jobs it creates and what it's done for our economy. And whether it's their first intention or their second intention or even unintentional, by having a stated policy that is discriminatory against our oil and gas industry, I don't want to support them.
That sounds like you got a good bill there, sir. Thanks.
Thank you.
Ms. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Burrows, I guess I'm trying to understand. It's if they have a stated policy, but if they don't have a stated policy, they're just choosing to do other investments. I guess we're not watching the market. Like, I'm not watching the markets. I think that's a question I have.
Yeah, no, that is the point, right? I mean, if we have a investment company that chooses to invest in renewables or electric cars or things like that,
because that's the best.
If they think that's the best way to maximize their profits, this bill does not affect that investment strategy. That is totally fine if that's where they think the market's going. But when they have a stated purpose other than simply just making money, which is what we want them to do, but their stated purpose is to have this ESG strategy, which would not invest in oil and gas. It would basically discriminate against it no matter how good of an investment it is. I don't want to do business with them.
I guess we all have jobs and we're really busy, so we're not saying like if they make a choice because they have a prediction of the markets, and so it's only if they have like a stated objection to doing business with Texas oil and gas companies.
Well, oil in general, but it happens to be Texas oil and gas, yes. So SB 14, we've asked the comptroller to find which ones have those stated policies that are discriminatory to, our state's one of our biggest assets, and they have developed a list of those investment managers that basically we're not going to do business with them for those reasons. But they have to have a stated policy. It's not just they happen to be only into renewables or things like that. It has to be a, position they've taken.
And I don't know this, but has there been any reporting or anything on the impact of SB 14 on our funds?
I'd have to take a look. I'm not aware at this time.
Okay, I think, and I have to go back and look. I did remember seeing an article that's saying that the passage of SB 14 did have a negative impact. I'm not saying this is a bad idea. I do understand what you're saying about the discriminatory function. I just want to make sure we aren't unintentionally creating some type of negative impact on our fund.
Well, and of course, we also have to think about the collateral impact as well, that if all of a sudden we don't have investment managers going into Texas-based economies, oil and gas industries, or devaluing of minerals, how does that affect the underlying, capital anyways?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I want to look at it holistically.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that whatever we do doesn't have any domino effect here.
All right.
Okay.
Drill here, drill now.
Agreed. Mr. Burrows, members, any more questions? Mr. Burrows, you close? There's no objection. HB 3619 will be left pending. Hearing none, bill is pending. Chair lays out HB 4722 and recognizes Ms. Howard. Explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. This is a very simple bill. I know we always say that, but this is just a few words that are being omitted in the current statute. And if we do pass this, even though it's a very simple bill, it will have a huge impact for our community college students, our public state colleges, Lamar State and Orange and Port Arthur, and students attending our public technical institutes. The Texas Education Opportunity Grant, or TEOG, is the state's primary form of student financial aid for our two-year institutions. In most respects, it's analogous to the better-known and better-funded Texas grants that's for our four-year institutions. State appropriators fund these grants through the coordinating board, and the colleges are required to make up the delta between the cost of tuition and the grant amount awarded. This is true for both Texas grants and TEOG. However, the two-year institutions have one other stipulation. Statute prohibits them from utilizing federal Pell Grants in the student's financial aid package to make up that difference, while four-year institutions are allowed to use Pell Grants to close that gap. The practical effect of this is that community and technical colleges must use other sources of funds from their operating budget to make up that gap. This prohibition on utilizing Pell Grants dates back to the creation of what eventually became TEOG back in 2001, when it was passed as part of a larger bill and called Texas Grants 2. As far as we've been able to find, there was no stated reason for this. Legislative research librarians could find nothing in the historical record, and those who were around at the time cannot recall anything being said about this. So from our vantage point here in 2023, there seems to be no policy reason to forbid our community and technical colleges from utilizing Pell Grants, and there's no opposition to striking these four words from statute. To give some indication of the impact this would have on our state's colleges, we may have some testimony that would give more statistics, but the gap is preventing at least some colleges from being able to utilize the full amount of the TEOG funding that they receive. This bill does not cost the state anything, and in fact would not only free up those other funds that are currently having to be used to make the required match, but by counting Pell Grants toward these matching funds, as is currently allowed for four-year institutions, it will enable the state's TEOG funds to reach more students. No fiscal note, better utilization of existing state investments, and improved financial aid for community college students. This is one simple fix that will have several great policy wins for our state. So I'm happy to answer any questions and reserve the right to close.
Give you that right. Thank you, Ms. Howard. Chair calls Ray Martinez. Thanks for hanging in there, Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chair registers Ray Martinez testifying on behalf of Texas Association of Community Colleges for the legislation.
That is correct,
Thanks,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman. Thank you, sir. Thank you to Representative Howard for authoring this testimony, and Mr. Chairman for putting this on the agenda today. I think I'm your last witness, so I know my job is to be very brief. I think Representative Howard laid out this bill pretty succinctly. We see this, the 48-member institutions of tax see this as a technical correction. I'm old enough and have been around this building long enough to remember when we created the Texas Grant Program back in 1999. 2 years later, in 2001, we carved out of that program Texas Grant 2, which was specifically for students that are seeking an associate's degree or a certificate at a community college, a TSTC campus, or one of our Lamar institutions. That was 2001. It was called Texas Grant 2. When they carved it out of Texas Grant, there's a requirement, as Representative Howard explained, that every institution has to meet a differential, or what we call a match. So, for example, at Alamo Colleges, Mr. Chairman, in San Antonio, the average tuition and fees for this current academic year is $3,200. So, a student shows up and has to pay $3,200, but through their FAFSA, they demonstrate that they're eligible for need-based financial aid. So at Alamo Colleges, they could actually put, let's say they get $500 in a TEOG grant for that academic year. Let's say they get another $500 in a TPEG grant, which is also another financial aid program that is actually funded through some set-asides, but there's not a lot of money that goes into TPEG for that program, both at our universities and our community colleges. That leaves $2,200, a differential. At our universities, when Texas Grant was created back in 1999, that differential could be met by showing how much the student is getting in federal Pell Grant. So if the student is getting another $2,200 in federal Pell Grant, there is no institutional match or differential that the institution has to pay. However, when they carved out Texas Grant 2 in 2001, for reasons we can't determine, and we don't think there's any policy reasons behind it, for students seeking an associate degree or certificate, community colleges, TSTCs, and our Lamar institutions, we cannot count Pell Grant that's already in the student's financial aid bucket. And trust me, any student that is eligible to receive TEOG is likely eligible to receive Pell Grant. When I went to college, I was a Pell Grant recipient myself. So we would just like to have uniformity here and ask that the legislature strike the words Pell Grant out of the TEOG statute in the Education Code to allow our institutions and the TSTCs and the Lamar institutions to be able to count what's in a student's financial aid bucket for Pell Grant toward that differential. What does it mean if we can't do it? For our small and medium-sized colleges, it means that coming up with that differential, let's say that $2,000 or $2,200, comes out of the institution's pocket. And for our small and medium-sized colleges, that's a big deal. I'm not saying it's not a big deal across all of our 50 community colleges across the state, but it particularly hits hard for our small and medium-sized colleges. So it's an issue that we think needed to be addressed for some time now. We're asking that you all address it now, and we appreciate that the representative has brought this bill. So I hope that is helpful, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer any questions about this important piece of legislation.
Yeah, Ms. Martinez, thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to testify on for or against HB 4722? Seeing none, Chair recognizes Ms. Howard to close.
Thank you, members. I close.
If there's no objection, the bill will be left pending. Hearing no objection, HB 4722 is left pending. And members, we have one matter of pending business that I'd like to take up. Chair lays out HB 4578 by Chairman Longoria as pending business. Members, this is the bill that is in anticipation of the Supreme Court ruling striking down the use of race as factor in college admissions. The bill will allow UT to cap their incoming automatic admissions at 75% of the incoming class. Representative Paul moves that HB 4578 reported favorably to the full House. Recommendation do pass be printed and sent to the Committee on Local and Consent Calendars. Excuse me. No, no, understood. Representative Paul moves that HB 4578 be reported favorably and reported to the full House for recommendation that do pass and be printed. Clerk will call the roll.
Kemple.
Aye.
Paul.
Aye.
Busey. Aye. Burns. Burrows.
Aye.
Clardy. Cole.
Aye.
Gonzalez. No. Howard.
Aye.
Lalani. Aye. Rainey.
Aye.
8 ayes, 1 nay.
Being 8 ayes, 1 nay, the motion prevails. Members, that concludes today's agenda. Is there any further business for the committee to address? If not, the chair moves to adjourn. Is there any objection? Hearing none, the committee stands adjourned, subject to call of the chair.